I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, the battle for Congress. After months of campaigning, the handshaking, the speeches, and the ads are finally over. Now the voters are having the last word on who will control the House and the Senate. Voters worried about the war and struggling with those new electronic voting machines.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric reporting from CBS News Election Headquarters in New York.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's election night, and voters all over the country are deciding who will control the new Congress. The Republicans have been in charge of the Senate for most of the past 12 years. They now hold all those seats in red. Democrats, the blue. To change the balance of power, 6 seats would have to move from the Republicans to the Democrats. Meanwhile, the Republicans have controlled the House for all of the past 12 years. The Democrats would need to pick up 15 seats to shift the balance of power to them. Now, polls are still open in much of the country. If they're open where you are and you haven't voted, please do. Then come back to CBS and watch your vote count. We have a terrific team of correspondents here in our election headquarters and all across the country. And we'll begin tonight with the dean of our team, our chief Washington correspondent, Bob Schieffer. Bob, what can you tell us so far?
Well, here's what we can't say. We can't talk about individual races because the polls haven't closed yet, Katie. But if our nationwide exit polls are right, the wind is blowing very much for the Democrats, and it looks like a strong wind. Here is the big news. By a margin of 2-1 now, voters told us today that they thought national issues were more important than local issues. Just look at these numbers. 62% thought that national issues were more important than local issues. That is extraordinary. All politics may be local, but apparently not this time, and that is bad news for the Republicans. What is the issue? It is Iraq. Nearly 60% of the people we questioned today said they do not approve of the war, and Katie, they don't like anything about it. They don't like keeping the troops there. They want to begin withdrawal, and perhaps the most damning thing for the administration, Katie, a large number of people, 58%, said they do not believe the war in Iraq is helping U.S. security. That, if that mood persists through this evening, it's going to be a very long night for Republicans.
So a referendum on the war, but ergo a referendum on President Bush as well, right?
Absolutely. 37% of the people who voted today said they were voting against President Bush. Now, we have to temper that by saying 25% said they were voting for him. But again, this is extraordinary in an off-year election for people to say national issues count more than local issues. This is a referendum.
And sending him a message both positive and negative,
Yep.
but more negative than positive.
Yep.
Okay, Bob, thank you very much. This was President Bush's final campaign, his last midterm election, and no one's watching the returns tonight more closely than he is. He's had a Republican-controlled House and Senate for most of his presidency. Now he's waiting to see what it will be for his final 2 years in the White House. Jim Axelrod is there tonight. Jim?
Well, Katie, this exit poll data you're talking about is really the White House's worst fear, that this becomes all about President Bush. For the last several weeks, President Bush has said he would not be reaching out to Democrats prior to the election because Republicans were going to win. Well, we're now told that the White House is looking for a phone number for the Senate's top Democrat, Harry Reid, just in case they have to reach him.
After slamming Democrats nonstop in 13 states during the last 10 days of campaigning, this morning Mr. Bush made a nonpartisan appeal after voting in Crawford, Texas.
No matter what your party affiliation or if you don't have a party affiliation, do your duty, cast your ballot, and let your voice be heard.
The president is having dinner tonight with Karl Rove, his top political advisor, as well as Ken Mehlman, the head of the Republican National Committee. We're told the president will make no public statements tonight. He'll probably say something tomorrow. But, Katie, the mood here at the White House, not exactly optimistic.
All right, Jim Axelrod, thank you so much. Control of the Senate will be determined by close races in just a handful of battleground states. Behind me here in our CBS News election headquarters, national political correspondent Gloria Borger is following those races tonight. Gloria?
Katie, you can really see what might be called the Bush factor at work in the fight for control of the Senate tonight. The crucial seats are in 10 battleground states, and 8 of those seats are currently held by Republicans. In particular, we're watching 3 states that the president won handily in 2004. First, in Virginia, Republican incumbent George Allen is locked in a battle against former Navy Secretary Jim Webb. Early exit polls indicate that the president is not as popular as he once was there. And in Tennessee, where George Bush won by 14 points 2 years ago, people are almost split down the middle on his job performance. Democrat Harold Ford is in a tight race there with Republican Bob Corker. And in Missouri, which is considered the bellwether of this campaign, more people now disapprove of the president than approve of him. And he won there by 7 points in 2004. And Katie, in the state of Missouri, voters are indicating that the economy is extremely important, and we're also seeing this in other key battleground states as well.
Gloria, we've heard so much about Virginia, Tennessee, and Missouri and how critical these races are. What needs to happen tonight for both parties?
Well, both parties want to win 2 out of 3 of those states, to put it simply, Katie. The Republicans set that up as the so-called firewall because they said if they lose 2 out of 3 of those, they're gone. They don't control the Senate. So those are the key races.
All right, to be continued. Gloria, thanks so much. Now to the battle for the House. The Democrats came into this election night confident of winning it for the first time since that Republican takeover back in 1994. Capitol Hill correspondent Cheryl Atkinson is following the House races tonight. Cheryl?
Well, Katie, all 435 seats are up for grabs in the House, as you know, but only about 10% of those are at serious risk of changing parties. Here's the problem for Republicans. We've identified 52 competitive races. Of those, 48 are currently held by Republicans. 6 months ago, many of them were considered eternally secure, but not anymore. The competitive races that could help tell the story of the night are clustered in about 10 states. In the eastern half of the U.S., where the polls close earliest, we'll be particularly looking at Indiana, Connecticut, places like that, in Pennsylvania. In each of those states, there are at least 3 seats considered competitive. Republicans know they will lose some of them, but the key is how many. If Democrats win more than 2 in any of those states, they've told us that could signal a bad night for the GOP. Katie?
All right, Cheryl, thank you. You have heard it before. You're going to hear it again. Turnout is the key to winning tonight. Both parties agree on that. And they've been doing everything they can today to get out the vote. And in some places around the country, turnout is reported to be very heavy. Lee Cowan is in the Buckeye battleground state of Ohio tonight.
With some light rain this morning, 47 at your official weather station.
The bellwether state of Ohio offered pretty crummy weather this morning.
Good morning, Columbus, Ohio! Happy Election Day!
But soggy slogans aside, voters here weren't going to let a little rain dampen their enthusiasm at the polls.
I think today will be a very large turnout.
If you can't take 5 minutes out to vote, you don't have a right to complain about anything.
And those complaints about the current crop of politicians seemed a great motivator.
There is a lot of fighting, and I'm tired of it.
It's just very upsetting to see people behaving in such a way that we don't allow in grade schools. So,
tell me your street address again.
Paul Bingle has been working elections here for decades. Hasn't seen a Midwest midterm like this in years.
We were expecting a moderate day today, but for the first couple hours it looked like a presidential election.
It was the case in many states today where a heavy turnout had been expected for weeks. That was especially true in places with bitterly fought contests, like Senator George Allen's race in Virginia and Harold Ford's Senate race in Tennessee. Both states where early voting was up substantially. But in states like California, which had very few tight races, turnout was actually expected to be near a record low. But even this election day drenching in the Northwest is having little effect on voters. Most of them here already mailed their ballots in.
Katie, the record voter turnout for a midterm election was set all the way back in 1970 when it was 47% of the electorate. Now, most people don't think we're going to hit that number tonight, but we could get very close or even surpass the second highest number. That was set all the way back in 1982 when it was 42% of the electorate turned out. Katie?
All right, Lee Cowan in Ohio. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, Lee. Take heavy voter turnout, brand new electronic voting machines, and inexperienced poll workers, and it all adds up to voting problems. 1/3 of all voters are casting their ballots electronically for the very first time. Our chief investigative correspondent, Armin Katayan, has been following the election night face-off between man and woman and machine.
Scattered problems surfaced early in the day in about 15 states, from Rhode Island to Florida to Utah. The trouble was fueled by technical glitches, human error, and heavy turnout. Simply huge numbers of voters and poll workers using new machines for the first time.
Why machines broke here? You know, it looks too suspicious. It looks too ridiculous.
Indiana was the scene of frustration when poll workers couldn't remember how to get the machines started. As a result, a judge ordered poll hours be extended by 2.5 hours.
20% of all the precincts in this county did not open up properly this morning.
One Ohio congresswoman struggled to vote by optical scanner and gave up on the machine. While in Illinois, Chicago election officials struggled to troubleshoot their new touchscreen machines.
What do you all want this machine to do? Excuse me.
Out west, California appeared quiet, but in Colorado, untrained poll workers made for long lines and long faces.
The cards they gave us from the county are not working right now.
In Utah, voters in 2 major counties faced delays of up to 90 minutes. In some states, new, tougher voter ID requirements added to the confusion. South Carolina's governor was wrongly turned away when the address on his driver's license didn't match the registration list.
Well, so far, Katie, these new machines have mostly caused inconvenience. The real verdict on how they've performed is coming tonight as votes are counted.
And Armin, I know that both sides have enlisted an army of lawyers to deal with any problems that might surface.
Absolutely, Katie. 7,000 alone for the Democrats.
Wow. All right, Armin Katayan. Thanks, Armin. CBS News will bring you election updates throughout the evening, and I'll be anchoring an hour-long special report with the latest results and analysis beginning at 10/9 Central. For returns the second you want them, you can go to our website at cbsnews.com. And there's much more CBS News ahead right here. Coming up next, from stem cell research to raising the minimum wage, the other elections we're following. Back now from CBS News election headquarters. In addition to the big national and local races tonight, voters in 37 states are voting on a number of important ballot initiatives. Sharon Alfonsi in St. Louis is watching those tonight. Sharon?
Well, the president and Iraq may be the main reason many voters went to the poll, but some voters are just as passionate about ballot initiatives, and perhaps nowhere more than here in Missouri, where some voters say the reason they went to the poll is to vote on stem cell research. Now, voters here are considering an initiative that would ensure that any kind of stem cell research that's allowed in the U.S. is protected in Missouri. Now, voters in 6 states, including Missouri, are considering raising the minimum wage. 8 states could ban same-sex marriage, and 13 might curb the government's right to seize private property. And Arizona is going to decide if encouraging voters to voter turnout by awarding $1 million lottery prize to a lucky voter is a good idea. Now, Democrats believe this is going to rally their base. Republicans say it is going to re-energize theirs, and we are going to know soon enough. Katie?
All right, Sharon Alfonsi. Sharon, thanks so much. We want to turn now to a couple of people who have been through a few nail-biting election nights and know what they're like from the inside. CBS News political consultants Mike McCurry, who was press secretary to President Clinton, and Nicole Wallace, who was the communications director for the current President Bush. First of all, Nicole, I know you've been working on that BlackBerry like a fiend. What are your friends at the White House telling you about the mood there and what they're thinking?
Well, in a word, caution. And it's not just because some of these early signs don't look very encouraging. It's because they've been wrong. Mike and I were on the 2004 presidential campaign, and early in the night, we thought his campaign had won and that mine wasn't looking like it was going to have a very good night, and that turned out to be completely wrong.
And in fact, you have a funny story about that night.
It was at this hour 2 years ago that a group of us gathered with Senator John Kerry, and we were quite happy with the way things were going. We sent him off into the cold, rainy Boston night to write a victory speech. So things can turn around a lot.
You had to say, never mind.
Never mind.
But why do you think these polls seem to favor Democrats, exit polls, that
well,
is?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of effort has gone in structuring these so that they really do statistically reflect the country, but you can never get it accurate, and I think that's why properly all of the major news organizations wait to see what the actual results tell you about what's happening. It's very important for people to go vote. Nobody should make judgments about the way this election goes because of what they hear on a broadcast like this. There are polls open across the country, and people need to vote.
Meanwhile, as we heard Bob say, this election appears to be, from early exit polling results, a nationalized election. The notion that all politics are local seems to have been turned on its ear a bit. Are you surprised by that voters really are sending a message negative and some positive to President Bush.
Well, if that was the Republicans' greatest fear, and if that bears out, again, this data is early and inconclusive. If that bears out, that certainly doesn't bode well for Republicans. But they are saying now, one of my many emails is about how turnout is even higher in Republican districts than it was in 2004 when it broke all the records.
So you're holding on to that as a very positive sign.
Well, they point to that as just another piece of evidence that we're not going to know until late in the night. And they say, we hope that's the case. We hope this is one that goes on late into the night.
Katie, your point is right. Much more so than Bill Clinton, who was controversial, certainly. Much more than he played a role in his midterm elections. It does appear in this election that George Bush was very much on the minds of voters as they cast their ballots today.
And that's
probably a good thing. Probably a good thing for Democrats.
All right. Well, we'll be following all the returns and the results throughout the night and talking about them as well. Mike McCurry and Nicole Wallace.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you both so much. And coming up next on the CBS Evening News, a surprising plea for reconciliation from Saddam Hussein. And did you vote today? We're going to take you to a part of America where almost everyone does, and they all deserve a gold star.
If we don't vote, we get what we deserve. So that's why I came out to vote.
I think no matter what your views, it's just a very important election. We need some changes, no matter what your party is.
From overseas tonight, a call for peace and forgiveness in Iraq from some unlikely sources. Saddam Hussein's former second-in-command called on Ba'ath Party leaders to end their attacks. And Saddam himself called on Iraqis, other Arabs, and Kurds today to, quote, forgive, reconcile, and shake hands. He was back in court as testimony resumed at his second genocide trial. 2 days ago at his first trial, Saddam was sentenced to death by hanging. In London, the sentence is life in prison for confessed al-Qaeda terrorist Darren Barot. The judge also released some chilling videotape shot by Barot as he plotted attacks on the New York Stock Exchange and other targets in this country. And take a look at this. Near Seattle, a man nearly ran out of car roof to stand on as floodwaters kept rising all around him. Some parts of Washington state got 10 inches of rain in just 24 hours. As for that driver, it must have felt like a lifetime the few minutes it took rescuers to get him off the roof. And coming up next this election night, we're going to take you to the voting capital of America.
I've been voting for the last 7 years against this war, so I'm hoping this time it takes.
I've been a Republican all my life, and I just voted for a Democrat for the first time in 40-some years.
But the average turnout for a midterm election is less than 40%. Most other countries put us all to shame. But there is one place in America where voters turn out in big numbers, election after election. And Cynthia Bowers is there.
Thank you very much.
You can't always predict how Minnesotans will vote. After all, they elected a professional wrestler governor. But there's one thing you can always bank on. Minnesotans will vote. Even former vice presidents have to wait in line here.
That's what we do here. We all vote.
Well, almost everyone. In 2004, 77% of eligible voters turned out, compared to 60% for the nation as a whole. But it's midterm elections like this one where the state really shines. 4 years ago, 64% cast ballots, 25% more than the national average. When it comes to voting in Minnesota, there's no such thing as an off-year election. And don't even suggest it's because there's nothing else to do here. That just won't fly.
It goes back to the old principle, if you don't vote, you can't complain. So, and I love to complain.
Well, this year promises to be another barn burner in a once reliably Democratic state that's now neither red nor blue.
Minnesota is a purple state. It is real parity between the parties. And that kind of competition tends to bring people out.
And Minnesota is one of just 6 states that offers same-day voter registration. That alone ups turnout by 15%. But perhaps the biggest key to success is that Minnesota thinks small. Simply put, they raise voters here.
That's a good choice, Pop. That's a good choice.
Thanks to the program Kids Voting, this year some 80,000 school children will go to the polls with mom and dad.
It's good that they teach kids at a young age that it's always good to vote and that every vote counts.
Native Minnesotan Al Franken still marvels at the 85% turnout among students at one college campus in 2004.
In my college, we didn't have 85% turnout
at classes.
In Minnesota, it seems everyone and everything wants a say come Election Day. Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Minneapolis.
And we say congratulations, Minnesota. That is very impressive. That's also the CBS Evening News for this Election Day. I'll be back with election updates throughout the evening and an hour-long special report with the very latest results and analysis beginning at 9 Central. I'm Katie Couric reporting from CBS News Election Headquarters here in New York. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.
CBS News. See it now, anytime, anywhere.
Good evening, everyone. Our headline of the hour, the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives. The Senate, however, is still in play. By a nearly 2-to-1 margin, voters are telling our exit poll that this election is about national, not local issues. And they're saying they disapprove of both President Bush and the war in Iraq. Let's take a look at where things stand right now. In the House, CBS News estimates that Republicans have won 149 seats, the Democrats 161. Turning now to the Senate, CBS News estimates Republican Senator Jon Kyl has won re-election in the state of Arizona. The Democrats have picked up 3 seats, including Rhode Island, where Sheldon Whitehouse has unseated Republican incumbent Lincoln Chafee. In Pennsylvania, where Bob Casey Jr. has defeated incumbent Rick Santorum, and in the Buckeye state of Ohio, where Sherrod Brown defeated incumbent Mike DeWine. Control of the Senate will be determined in 4 key states, Virginia, Tennessee, Missouri, and Montana. Democrats need to win 3 of those 4 seats to take control. Finally, CBS News estimates California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger has been reelected. Polls have closed everywhere except Alaska. For those of you in the West, we'll have a full hour of election coverage at 10 p.m. Pacific time. I'm Katie Couric. You're watching Election Night here on CBS.